Okay, so today is August 9th, 2006. This is another in our series of archival interviews for Brown Medical School. It's my pleasure today to interview the fourth dean of Brown Medical School, Professor Eli Adashi. We are sitting in his office in the Arnold Laboratories on the campus of Brown University. First of all, thank you, Dean Adashi, for agree to be interviewed.
Delighted.
I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your life story, your career, how you ended up here at Brown.
But perhaps before we launch into that, I should probably correct a historic fact. I am technically speaking the fourth dean, but we try to recognize the term of my predecessor, who was an interim dean, but nevertheless spent long 2.5 or so interim years on the job. And so, as a matter of practice, we routinely refer to him as a dean. And so, from that point of view, I'd like to think of myself as the fifth dean. But that's just a relative statement. About my life story, you really didn't mean it, did you? It's as long as yours, perhaps longer. But if we were to just stick to the highlights, I would say that importantly, I'm a native of the state of Israel, that I completed my medical training at the Sackler School of Medicine in Tel Aviv, that I received my residency training, in my case in obstetrics and gynecology, at Tufts University School of Medicine in Boston, and that I completed subsequent subspecialization and postdoctoral training in a number of institutions, all in the area of reproductive biology and medicine. It was after that I assumed a series of positions of growing responsibility in several schools, most recently at the University of Utah, which is where I was made aware of this position through a pamphlet that was circulated by a headhunter, to my recollection. And upon reviewing the offering, it struck me as interesting, and I expressed willingness to be considered. What followed was a very long and arduous process that ultimately resulted in an offer which brought me to Providence, to Brown University, and to its Division of Biology and Medicine. An abbreviated version, but hopefully helpful.
And could you say a bit of the time course of when you arrived here, and what were some of your reasons for deciding to come here?
There were some very clear reasons why the position was appealing. First and foremost, I would say Brown University and its various divisions, including the Division of Biology and Medicine, were going through an upsurge, a renaissance, a renewal. Secondly, the leadership was appealing. The individuals who I was going to report to, Provost Zimmer and President Simmons, were individuals I was highly impressed with and looked forward to working with. And thirdly, this was an opportunity to try my skills on a larger scale than a department, which was the scope of my responsibilities at the time, I felt I had a lot to offer, and to the extent that Brown agreed with that, I was looking forward to being of service.
What were some of your initial goals, or what are some of your goals now as dean?
I think the initial goals and the goals that I pursue now are one and the same. You hope that over time we can check off some of those goals, but for the time being, there's still plenty of work to do. I would say that topping our list is our desire to see to the creation of a sense of oneness as opposed to groupness between Brown's Division of Biology and Medicine and its teaching hospital partners. We already have clearly a very fine educational relationship with our teaching hospital partners. What we lack is seamless integration in the scientific domain. That's not to say that we are not on speaking terms, or that we're not collaborating, or that there is some moratorium on collaborativeness. It just means that we are not living to our full potential, that we are undervalued, if you will, that we're not leveraging all the intellectual assets we have, that we're missing economies of scales, and I could probably come up with a few other downsides of the inability to really seamlessly connect and coordinate the entirety of the enterprise. I would say that was and remains a major goal. I would probably say that we are making good progress in that arena, and I hope that more can be reported when we sit down again in a few years. The second key goal that I think we planned on pursuing from the very beginning was, of course, an effort to contemporize and renew, replenish, rejuvenate the medical school. That is a multifaceted effort, but one which universally was felt to be necessary, and in the context of which I think we are making great progress. As you know, on August the 21st, we'll be inaugurating the first version of the new curriculum. I say first because there's almost certainly going to be much more by way of curricular revision and innovation and trimming and the like that I think is coming down the line. Facilities have been upgraded, a new lecture hall will be used this year, and there are long-term plans to, in effect, create a distinct physical entity, a building that would constitute the medical education facility of Brown Medical School, most likely downtown. Thirdly, we remain committed to the hope and to the actualization of the conversion of the program in public health to a school in public health. This is not imminent in the sense that this will take a few years because of the rigorous nature of the accreditation process and some other adjustments that would have to be made. But if all goes well, This is a goal we would like to see accomplished by 2010, 2011 at the latest. I think we're on track to do that, although, as is true of any major change of this magnitude, we will inevitably have to go through a variety of affirmation and approval processes that are university-based and ultimately will have to present a compelling case to Brown's Corporation, without which this type of a momentous change does not transpire. So the goals we had are the goals we have, and we're working on all of them in parallel, making good progress, I think, in all of them. And in due course, hopefully, we'll have more to report.
Well, that was very eloquent, and I think you were able to summarize a pretty broad program. Would you like to comment at all about any of the joys and challenges you've had in the first year and a half?
The joys have mostly to do with getting things done. When a good thing happens in terms of moving the agenda forward, there is a sense of satisfaction. When a faculty or a student is recognized for an accomplishment, or an award, or a grant, a prize, that's a joy. That's a source of satisfaction. When I visit laboratories of our faculty who are engaged in whatever type of science you may think of, that's a joy, because on that occasion I get back to at least a portion of my roots, having spent a long time in the sciences as well. It's also about connecting with the principal investigator, the faculty member, connecting with the individuals who work in his or her lab, undergraduates, graduate students, postdocs, US trained, US born, and some from overseas, a very heterogeneous and diverse group that's just fun to interact with. That's a joy. When a graduating class concludes commencement exercises and heads towards the door to walk out of the First Unitarian Church, that's a good feeling. That's a plus. There's lots of those, and I probably enumerated only a small number. Challenges abound as well, and they have to do with a whole host of issues that understandably need to be dealt with when progress is sought. Has to do with the fact that in the end it's all about the human resource and the need to handle with care and to be respectful, to be caring, and to keep the eyes on the prize and not be distracted by relatively minor elements along the way. To be sure, it's, as in anything, it's a balance between joys and challenges, um, it probably wouldn't be a rewarding position if all was well, if all the trains were running on time, if everybody was absolutely happy and running out of things to think about or want. That would be a rather uninteresting job, and probably not one I would be terribly interested in. Going back to the discussion we had about how I arrived here, peculiarly enough, it's the challenges that you recognize are there, that you know are going to keep you, you hope, employed for a number of years before these issues are addressed. That drew me in the first place. It's probably in the nature of individuals who take on these positions that they are interested in challenges, not in coasting, not in a holding pattern, not in autopilot, but in improving, in changing, and basking in that glory. When time has gone by, you look back, and hopefully you made a difference.
Any stories that you'd want to tell at this point of either conflicts, tensions, particularly moving moments, something that you say to yourself, this really stood out in the last year and a half?
I would cite a more of a personal positive. When I was first appointed, word must have filtered somehow to Dr. Raymond Sackler, a benefactor after whom my medical school was named. You may recall that I mentioned that I graduated from the Sackler School of Medicine in Tel Aviv. Upon receiving the news, he called me and introduced himself. I never met the man, indicating how pleased he was that a member of the, as it turns out, the first graduating class that went all the way. In other words, started in year 1 and completed in year 6, which is the standard in Europe and in Israel, to actually hold a position of consequence in the American academic healthcare system. And he wanted to, in effect, recognize this development, to him an accomplishment, in some way by facilitating the cause of Brown. And while what that was to be was not perhaps spelled out precisely at the beginning, over time, as we got to know each other better and we discussed various possibilities, Dr. Sackler, through a foundation that he supports, ended up facilitating a very specific but very interesting research project here at Brown with one of our investigators who will be the beneficiary of the gratefulness of Dr. Sackler, for which I'm obviously very grateful, and I'm very pleased. I never thought in my wildest dreams when I graduated that I would ever meet Dr. Sackler. He was a name on the building at that point for me, and to later on have dinner with him, have lunch with him, correspond with him, in fact represent Brown in the context of interactions with him, was unanticipated and rewarding. An interesting closure of a very long-term loop. Very long-term loop.
No, that's actually a great story. Any others you want to tell today, or anything about any relationships that you've seen or established with hospitals, faculty, campus departments, the president,
Probably
provost?
too numerous to count. The provost, who has since moved on, was a very special gentleman, a searing intellect, perhaps is the first word that comes to mind. One of the greatest articulators I've ever met, who could break down issues in a very logical way and provide insight that wasn't there before. That was a great lesson that is hard to emulate, but was a sight to behold. The president, likewise, is a remarkable individual whose level of sageness, if I can use that term, is again one that I have not observed before. She looks at things in a very different way that exposes facets of an issue again in a way that all I can say when I observe it is, why didn't I think about it? Or I wish I did think about it. And she exudes leadership, which I still contend is an ephemeral, ill-defined, difficult to quantify attribute. And yet, you can tell and recognize it when you see it. That's far more difficult to define it. She clearly has it, and I'm grateful to her for the role model that she is providing, for her support to me personally and to the division in a broader sense, as she does to all other facets of the university. So I think we are quite fortunate to work in the shadow of some quite remarkable people. I've gotten to know a lot of faculty, and some I've gotten closer to than others. I've gotten to know a lot of medical students. Some I've gotten closer to than others. I've met a few graduate students. I don't know them quite as well as I would like, but that's changing with my weekly or bi-weekly lab visits, which I conduct. I do 1 or 2 lab visits a week now. So over time, I, by definition, meet all the graduate students and postdocs who are in our midst. But I'm happy to say that even after a year and a half, I certainly don't know all our 680 or thereabouts full-time faculty. But, and I've never counted, but my sense is I know a great number of them by now, by name and by reputation, and in terms of prior interactions. That's the consequence of many, many hours in this office meeting faculty over the last year and a half and visiting them at their respective sites. Still more to do, but I think quite a bit to write home about there too.
Is there anything else that you would like to add about the first year and a half here? Any first impressions, any events that you want recorded for the historical record?
In the end, it's a series of incremental efforts that by the time the effect change, it's almost imperceptible. So I don't think I can speak to any seminal or momentous changes in the last year. But I do think that when you get to a vantage point that is another year or two removed from now, let's say, and look back, the cumulative impact, I think, of these multitude of effects and actions is going to be, I hope, a very positive one. This being my first and presumably last position for dabbling in deanship, I would advise to anybody who is exploring this opportunity to consider it at their peril, and think long and hard before they embark on what is very demanding, all-consuming, all-immersing type of experience that is rewarding, but is not without its challenges. In short, I'm available for consultation for anybody who is keenly interested in experiencing and experimenting going forward.
Well, thank you for that.
Thank you, Jeff.
We'll switch gears a little bit, just for the last two questions on another topic on family medicine. I was wondering if there's anything you wanted to say about family medicine here at Brown. We're coming up to our 30th reunion of the residency, and we have a department here at Brown. So I was wondering if there's any general comments, any accolades, and any welcoming statements.
I'm very aware that the Department of Family Medicine at Brown Memorial Hospital, based as it is and was for a long time, has a proud tradition. I'm also very aware that in a consistent way, over a long time, that department was highly ranked nationally, was successful in garnering research support and in conducting meaningful, often large-scale research, be it in cardiovascular disease or women's health. I am quite aware of the current strength, which I see growing. And so I have a great deal of respect to now generations of chairs and faculty who have shaped the department and made it what it is. My judgment is that the beat goes on, that the excellence has been maintained and continues to be maintained. It also seems very appropriate to recognize the leadership of the hospital that has been supportive of the department and its service and investigative pursuits. And in so doing, in a sense, made it all possible. In other words, there is a level of partnership that is noteworthy, that is working, and I think that is making much of this possible. Lastly, I would want to articulate my personal sense of admiration for the family physician in particular, and to other primary care providers in general, for if you will, maintaining the flame of caring and dedication, mostly for the underserved, throughout their activities in community-based clinics, community health centers, and other locales to which the underserved tend to flock. It is very clear also that when a medical student makes the decision to enter a family medicine residency, he or she are doing it for the purest of reasons, for laudable motivation that is clearly not hinging on or associated with or linked in any way with compensation, which tends to be on the modest side in this arena. And so in general, as I may have shared with you at some earlier occasion, I think family medicine is a pure form of medicine that adheres to some of the finest principles that I think we all believe in, and that family medicine exercises day in and day out. So yes, I am very much wish to congratulate the department on the occasion of its important anniversary, and wish it continued success, enjoy and thrive.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And with that, we complete the first interview with Dean Eli Adashi, the 5th Dean of Brown Medical School. The date is August 9th, 2006. We're sitting in Arnold Laboratory. Thank you.